Hello, my fellow teachers. So today we're going to talk about the implication of syntax for teaching a second language and reading. We're going to dive into how to understand sentence structures and enhance teaching methods and reading comprehension strategies. So what we're going to look at today is we're going to do an introduction. We're going to talk about syntax in that second language of teaching methods, that learning view. We've got a couple slides on audio lingual method, the ALM, acquisition of view of language development. We're going to look at syntax and reading. And then we've got a couple slides on teaching strategies for using those syntactic clues. And then syntax in that academic text and the scaffolding in the academic text, and then a conclusion. So when we are looking at this, syntax is going to be the order of words and phrases in a sentence. This is the fundamental aspect of language, and teachers use their knowledge of syntax to enhance the second language instruction and the reading instruction. Today we're going to discuss and highlight how syntax influences teaching methods, and the features of these academic texts, and effective strategies that come with teaching academic language. So when we look at syntax, let's go to the next slide. So when we're looking at syntax, we're going to start with the learning view of the language teaching methods and how they're going to be incorporate syntax. Some of these methods, like that grammar translation method, are going to teach the syntax directly to the students. They're not going to have a whole lot of other stuff in there. When you look at other methods like ALM, they're teaching that syntax implicitly by through the drills and the role playing. And then just that I have over here, I took a copy out of chapter 10 to show the various different language teaching methods that incorporate syntax. You had that grammar-based one, which is the grammar translation. Again, the syntax is going to be taught directly. The students are studying that and studying the order of the words and the structures of structure of phrases in that new language that they're learning. When you're looking at the direct method, that's more of a communicative based learning method, and it is focusing directly on that vocabulary rather than the syntax. But it does put the vocabulary into sentences, so syntax is taught indirectly. Then when you're looking at very explicit teaching of syntax, that's the ALM, which we'll discuss a little bit more in depth here in a minute. And then you've got the notional functional, and that is, it focuses on the notions and functions of the language and all that fun stuff. And they contextualize this and start learning this through role plays and exercises. But again, like the direct method, syntax is not taught directly in there. And then the Suggestopedia, that's a fun word to try to figure out how to say. Again, syntax is not taught that direct way, but it is, again, conceptualized within exercises in that role play. All right. There we go. So when we're looking at the audio lingual method of teaching, of teaching this, here's kind of the overview of it. It was developed in the 1940s and is based on the structural linguistics and that behavioral psychology. How do we learn and do these things? It is emphasized as that listening skills and the speaking skills, using dialogues and drills and repetition. You see a lot of this where I see a lot of this is when you're talking about foreign language classes that some of the high schoolers take, and they'll use this a lot. This type of way of teaching the language that way, and then this method minimizes the use of the student's native language, and it's going to teach them grammar through very logical sequences. With audiolingual, there are obviously strengths and weaknesses. One of the biggest some of the strengths that it has is that it does develop the student's pronunciation very well. It allows them to build that confidence in the listening and speaking as they do these drills. The grammar acquisition is through the practice, not necessarily being explained. So they're going to learn how to write it, and they'll be given a sentence and they write this sentence over and over again. The biggest problem is that the weaknesses that they've got is the repetition. It can become very monotonous to the students. It's boring, and we've got those problems. And there is no focus really on the reading and writing skills. And it does not encourage that learner to have autonomy or critical thinking. Basically, what the book basically said is it's very surface level teaching. There's no real in-depth teaching to it. And this is pretty much based on outdated outdated theories. Those linguistic and psychological theories, they're outdated that they're using this for. All right. Sorry, my computer's deciding to be ornery. There we go. All right. And I'll move me down a little bit more. Okay. So we have our acquisition view of language development. This acquisition view focuses on communication rather than that explicit grammar teaching. So syntax is taught within that academic content as seen as methods like that silent way, which uses the visual aids like the Cuisenaire rods, and that's where you might have the verb written underlined in green and the noun in red, and they just use that to try to help them memorize how that goes. So you're using a visual cue to help them learn that content. And then you have the content-based methods, which is the CALA and the SIOP, and these both are going to include content and language objectives as they are being taught. So when we're looking at syntax and reading, syntax is going to play a very different role in the various ways of reading. So when you're looking at the learning view of teaching, the syntax plays that very limited role. They're going to be focusing on phonics and the vocabulary versus syntax in how they're teaching it. They're not as worried about the structure of the sentences as they are learning the phonics and the vocabulary. When you start getting into the acquisition view, syntax is very crucial because especially with those proficient readers, they're using the syntactic clues to predict upcoming words, and that's where you may see when a student is reading, they are looking at that and they may guess what the next word is. And I shouldn't say guess, but because they're proficient in doing that, they already know what the word is, or they might do a substitution word that fits well into what they're reading and makes sense because they're looking at syntactic clues that might be doing in there. Okay. So when we're looking at teaching strategies for using these syntactic clues, we've got several activities that we can use, and I'll go a little bit further into on the next slide of more the characteristics, some of the teaching strategy characteristics. But some of the big ones that were mentioned within the chapter were predictable books. And these help beginning readers make predictions about syntax with their repetitive reading. One of the books that they mentioned was Mom, and it was saying like, Mom is reading, Mom is swimming, Mom is cooking. It's the same thing over, and the only thing they're changing is the verb. So it's very predictable, and they can do that, and so it's making the same sentence over and over again with just a different verb. So it was very repetitive, and it helps them start making those predictions. So, and then we also have the sentence frames, and these are providing the syntactic structure for students to complete sentences. So you may give them the beginning of the sentence, and they need to finish it with the rest of the sentence for helping them learn those syntactic structures better. And then the last one is within the close activity. These are encouraging students to use syntactic cues within their readings and things like that, or syntactic cues actually within the sentence to fill in missing words. You may be giving them a word bank to go with that. There's various different ways that you can use this. I've seen it where you have teachers use close activities when it comes to taking notes and things like that. So there's close activities is done in very different. I've seen it done in very different ways. All right, so our teaching strategies. We have, and these are some of the characteristics, and it says in academic writing, and it is within the academic writing, but it's also just in general teaching strategies when you're coming to teaching syntax. So when you're looking at direct instruction, we're going to use explanations, and this is going to be explaining what the syntactic clues are and how they help you understand familiar words. Then you also have modeling, and we all use modeling a lot, and it's basically where you're going to model the use of that syntactic clue to infer the meaning by thinking aloud while reading. And when you're doing this, you may use a small reading passage, and maybe there's a larger word in there that I know you may know, but the kids don't. So you're going to model of, well, what might this mean based on what we've read before? So that's how you would use the modeling. In the guided practice, we've got the word list, and when you're using word lists, they're going to use those word lists to discuss grammatical endings and their syntactic clues, and giving that and by having students work in pairs to do this, that really starts embedding it a little bit more into their minds. Sentence frames. This is where we're going to provide those frames to the students to complete. And as I mentioned before, you may have them choose words to fill in the blanks. You can have a word bank. Start discussing how these sentence structures, that subject-verb agreement, help guide their choices. And you want to make sure that they're understanding that and doing that. So you can't just give them the sentence frame with no instruction. That goes back to that modeling aspect of it. So the last portion of this is going to be the independent practice. You want to give them reading passages. Have them read the passages and start using syntactic clues to start inferring word meanings. And you want to make sure that it's got some unfamiliar vocabulary to them so that they can start using the syntactic clues. And then the last one would be word sorting. By engaging them in the word sorting based on syntactic clues from the word endings or the prefix and suffixes. And, again, it's just giving them words and giving them like ing or ed or pre, things that, go in front or back, and see how they can work and start working those into that direction. Move me over here. So when we're looking at the syntax and academic test, the academic tests have a very distinct syntactic features. We have that lexical density, where they are more lexically diverse or denser than the conversational language. In other words, it's a more complex language. It's not, hi, how are you doing? My name is Melissa. It's going to be a much more higher level thinking, not simplistic sentences. It's going to be very higher level sentences in that regards, and the vocabulary is going to be higher. When we're looking at abstraction and nominalization, we have the passive constructions and nominalizations make the text abstract. Now I had to, look at this a little bit more and do that. And basically what I came up with is the passive construction and nominalization contribute to making a more formal tone in the writing, which is very typical for academic tests. It's going to be more formal, which is also going with that and plays back into that lexical density. Again, some of the features of academic register, this is going to include technical, being very authoritativeness, informal density, or informational density, not informal, informational density, and that abstraction. All right, so when we're scaffolding their academic text, these scaffolding techniques can help students understand and produce more academic type tests. So what we're looking at is sentence combining. When we're doing that, we're going to start having students combine very simple sentences into more complex ones. So we can look at, my name is Melissa, I'm a teacher. And I could, use this as more like, my name is Melissa and I am a teacher. I mean, I know it's still very simple, but I've added in that combining and making it into something more complex. We're also going to start having them deconstruct and reconstruct sentences. Well, not even really sentences. It's more like the complex passages. And we're going to have them break those down and rebuild them into basically rebuild them, and then we're going to start having them write cohesive paragraphs. And this is where students start linking sentences within the paragraphs using topics and comments. You start seeing this where they're using and therefore and in conclusion, and start linking sentences together, so it's not just one thought going to the next without any way of combining them in together. So, in conclusion, second language teaching methods are going to vary in their approaches into that syntax. We've got the learning views emphasizing direct and indirect grammar teaching, while acquisition views are going to be embedding grammar into communication. And syntax does play a different role in various views in the reading. Academic texts are going to be very specific in the syntactic features, and they are going to require some scaffolding instruction for that comprehension in writing. And as long as we have, we are equipped with our syntactic knowledge, we can better support our students in this reading and writing academically.